Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoilery gush on the book Thief by Markus Zusak. As I said, this video will have spoilers in it, so if you've not read this book, go ahead and check out my spoiler-free review, which will be linked on the screen. So like I mentioned in my review, this book didn't quite live up to the hype for me, but I still found it really beautiful. I still enjoyed most of the story. I said in my review that there were points when I found it a little bit slow with like the day-to-day monotony of things, particularly before Max got there and after Max left. Like, I love Max as a character. So I loved like everything with him. I liked hearing his story. I liked seeing everything that happened to him before, and then seeing like what was happening when he was there and stuff. So when he left, it was very like, So those parts kind of slowed down for me. And also when you have death like spoiling stuff, like when you have death spoiling future deaths, it's like, okay, you told me about that and now we're backtracking, and that felt kind of like a little off to me. Like, I liked that element of the story, and it's very original and very unique with having death narrate, but I was still like, it almost slowed it down for me in a way. So it took me like 10 days to read this book, which is crazy. And there's like short chapters and stuff, but it just took me a very long time to get through it. And at one point I'm like, okay, that's okay, because I do feel like World War II novels in particular takes your time with and kind of sit with what's happening. And since this is happening over a long period of time, it's kind of nice to read it over like multiple days like that. But that just kind of speaks to how kind of slow I did find it at times. But I really loved Death's descriptions. I really loved Death's kind of zooming out and showing different situations, like when Hans was away at war and what was happening with him, and when certain battles were happening and you'd see what was happening, and like the concentration camp scenes are so beautifully done and like shook me to my core, because like you never get used to hearing that stuff. And the way that the deaths are described with that, and like, you know, them going into the showers and like him picking up like all of their bodies, like it's horrific, and this kind of description of it makes it even more so. Like, it's a very similar feeling to like when I watched Schindler's List, for example. Like, the choice to film that movie in black and white kind of gives it this feeling, and I got that same kind of feeling when they were doing those scenes in here. And just with a lot of the political things that are happening right now, particularly in the United States, and the rise of alt-right, also known as Nazism in the United States, happening, and all of that is just, it's good to constantly have these reminders of how these things happen, how they start, how they are allowed to start, and how people allow them to happen by not fighting back soon enough. Not like Jewish people, but just like normal, you know, like how the Germans allowed this to happen, and how like it's so insidious, and like these things can always repeat themselves. So reading historical novels, especially World War II novels, I think is important, because we're at a point where I honestly feel like history could repeat itself if we don't do something. And it's a good reminder to be like, this is the horrific things that were allowed to happen because someone used a whole nationality of people as a scapegoat. So yeah, that was particularly poignant, I think. But obviously the ending is just a punch to the gut. Like, you know what's gonna happen. Like, you know some of them are gonna die. You don't know who's gonna die, but you know some of them are gonna die. And then when you start getting hints at who is gonna die, that's just like, so I knew going in, like, people are gonna die, obviously. Death is narrating the story. It's a World War II story. People are gonna die. So I'm glad that, like, Liesel and Max made it, but the fact that, like, everyone else died, and, like, I like Rudy a lot, but he wasn't, like, my favorite character, but I definitely felt for that situation as well, and just, like, her, like, in the street, like, kissing him after he's, like, already gone, and just, like, her seeing her parents, and, like, Death describing all these people, like, dying in their beds, and she just happened to be downstairs writing, and that saved her, like, yeah, it's just a punch right to the gut. Just, like, the mayor's wife takes her and raises her, and she's with Rudy's dad, and that's when, like, Max finds her, and, like, they're reunited. I love them. Like, just that little, like, kind of found family situation is just great, and I just love it that they made it, although obviously I wanted everyone to make it, but, like, just the fact that, like, Max survived means a lot to me. I thought for sure he was gonna die. Like, especially when we had that whole, her finding him in the, like, line to the work camp kind of thing, and that whole conversation, like, I love him. He's one of my favorite characters. I just adore him. So now I also want to talk about the film, because I made the decision to watch the film right after I read the book. And I don't think there's going to be, like, real spoilers for the film. Like, obviously, you know what's going to happen I don't know. So if you haven't watched the movie and you really want to watch the movie, then I guess I wouldn't watch this because I'm going to talk about like scenes that they changed. But I really kind of wouldn't recommend you watching the movie if you've already read the book because, yeah, it's not that great. So I have a list on my phone of things that they got wrong because I started just taking notes of all the things that they got wrong. And here's what makes me really mad about this is like, yeah, every time you watch an adaptation, you're like, man, they changed all these things they didn't need to, blah, 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 blah. But like, I'm pretty lenient with adaptations, with movie adaptations. Like, I'm okay with like them leaving certain things out, like if they just keep in like the core things. And they didn't. Like, they did things that changed the entire integrity of the story that they didn't need to change. There's no reason to change those things. And particularly with a historical, like, fiction novel like this, why would you change all these elements? You just don't need to. And you just don't need to. And they change them a lot for, like, dramatic reasons, and it's like, this is World War II. You don't get more dramatic than World War II. You don't need to add in additional angst to World War II. Like, it's sufficiently dramatic enough. A lot of real shit stuff happened. Like, you don't need to add in anything extra. It doesn't make any sense. So first off, I hated that from the get-go they make Rosa like the instant kind of like foster mom villain. Like, they made her way more of an asshole in the movie, and it's just like, okay, she is an asshole. But she's like, Liesel makes the point towards the end of the book of saying like how she is that way, but she's actually very loving, and that's how she shows her love, and like she's a good person, and like she didn't question when Max came, which I'll get to later with the movie. And you have her being like, oh, we're not going to get any money for the boy, and all this stuff, which she didn't say in the book, and she wasn't a dick in the book. Like, why was she like that? Like, in the movie when Max comes, she suggests turning him in, but in the book, Liesel makes a point to say that she never once thought about turning him away, that Rosa, like, instantly brought him food, blah, blah, like, never complained about him at all. And in the movie, that's, like, the first thing she does. So that changes, like, an integral part of her character. Then we have the unnecessary bully character, like, the unnecessary bully boy in their school, who's, like, at the book burning and, like, making them burn books, and, like, he's the one that finds them on the bridge when she's talking about Max, which, again, I'll get to in a second, because, like, she didn't do that. So we have this unnecessary bully character. Why? You don't have to have, like, enough shitty things are happening. You have enough, like, just general Nazis in the area doing kind of bullying things. You don't need that bully kid character. They also have the essential change in the mayor and the mayor's wife, and I think they call him a different name, but maybe that's the German name for mayor. But you have the mayor's wife, who's, like, not catatonic, you know, who talks, who's like this vibrant person still, which is just completely different than how she is in the book, and it's kind of integral that's like not how she is in the book. And then you have the mayor being an actual character that kicks Liesel out, and that's why her mom like loses the job, why Rosa loses like the laundry job, like because he like catches them. But then it doesn't make sense at the end of the movie that they like come to like foster her, which I don't know if they technically do. I think they kind of imply that like Rudy's dad took her in. But their whole dynamic changes if you change those two characters and make him like this crazy like villain character, which he very well could have been, but he isn't a part of the book and he didn't need to be, and it changes the relationship that she has with the wife. Also, there's no real sense of a passage of time. Like, they briefly mentioned a few times when like, oh, Max has been here for a couple of years, blah, blah, blah. But like, you can't actually tell that because it feels like days have passed. So the only thing you can tell is that Liesel's hair is getting longer, but I don't know what rate hair grows. Like, how am I supposed to know how long it's been and how long he's been there? There's been like no montages or anything like that to kind of show the passage of time. Like, there was no real passage of time happening. Also, we have like none of Max's story about how he got there. We obviously have him leaving his family, but we don't know anything about him staying with his friend and that whole struggle, which I think is really important. You didn't have any of that. Where was that? I feel like that was also an essential part of his character. Gone. One minor thing that made me mad is that they changed book titles that Liesel stole. Like, she did steal all the books that she had stole in the story, which is important. We also didn't have Max, like, writing those stories for her, which I think is also really important. And they changed book titles to things that she stole to, like, well-known book titles. Like, I think there was some H.G. Wells and stuff in there, and it's like, why? I think the whole point of them in the story is that they aren't necessarily, like, well-known books. Also, timeline-wise, Rudy's dad leaves, like, way before Hans, where in the story, like, he's still there. That's part of the point, is like Rudy isn't gonna get sent to school, but in the movie he is because his dad's already gone. But the whole point of the end is that his dad opposed the Nazis taking Rudy away to school, and so he got sent away to war and Rudy stayed. And if that wouldn't have happened, Rudy would have already been gone at school and the dad would have been there and like he would have died. right? Like, there's a chance that Rudy could have survived if he would have, like, if they would have not opposed things. Like, there's this whole theme in the story of, like, chance and fate and, like, the way things happen and, like, just all of that kind of thing. And you change that by having his dad, like, gone before and not and, like, he was gonna go to school, all this stuff. Like, you change an essential element of the story that way. And like I said earlier, Max gave her a blank book, and that's, like, what she was writing in at the end, and he did give her a blank book at the end. But at the beginning, like, he turned Mein Kampf into his own story. That's so important! That's so important! And, like, it's just gone. It just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. That, like, kind of was what influenced her to write her own stories. And it's just not in there. Also, when they're in the bomb shelter, Hans plays the accordion while he's there, and he never even brought the accordion. That was kind of another part of, like, his character. He never brought the accordion to the bomb shelter, but suddenly he's playing it there. And also, she, in the book, read in the bomb shelter, and in this, she just, like, made up stories. Because it's all about her being, like, a storyteller. No, it's all about the importance of, like, already existing books, and instead they, like, change the whole thing. They're like, oh yeah, she made up stories in the bomb shelter. Like, no, she was reading in the bomb shelter. Also, about bombs, like, Max went outside during the raid? Like, during the bombings? Like, what? No, he barely saw this guy through... I think it's even more poignant to have him barely see this guy through, like, a sliver of curtain. Not to be going outside. Why would he do that? He wouldn't, because Max is a smart character and he's like a survivalist, and if you saw his whole story, you would see that. But they just decided up and then he's like, oh yeah, he's gonna go out in the middle. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And the biggest thing is Rudy finding out about Max and Liesel telling him. I think the whole point, like one of the biggest points of the story, is that Liesel is a child but yet still doesn't tell the secret, knows the importance of it, keeps this secret. And that's, like, a hugely important thing, and about, like, loyalty and trust between her family and stuff, and then she, like, tells Rudy. What? That changes so much about her character that she, like, tells him. Like, obviously she tells him at the end of the book, but she doesn't tell him when Max is still there and puts him in danger, then that, like, kid sees and blah, blah, blah. No. Then we don't even get the scene that I loved where she, like, saw Max in the crowd. She just was searching for Max in a crowd that didn't have him and is doing the things that she was doing while he was there. She didn't even see him. Like, that was one of the key scenes, is that she did see him in the crowd in, like, the march. And they make her act like when she did see him, but don't actually have him there. Like, the whole point is that she wouldn't make a scene like that if she didn't actually see him. But they make her do it anyway. What? Between that and telling Rudy, it's like, that's completely not her character at all. Also with timeline stuff, Hans left and then came back really quickly, and like we don't even really see his interactions, and we saw that whole thing with like him getting hurt, but people are making fun of him and everyone's like a jerk to him, and that's not what happened when he was at the war. Like, the whole point was like he had made friends and that's how he got back, and that whole like circumstances thing, like, and how like fate does stuff, like that's the whole point. And that just is just taken out. And it's like, oh, everyone made fun of him because he's old and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, that didn't happen. He was friends with everybody, and, like, that's kind of one of the reasons why he made it back. What? And lastly, and I guess this isn't, like, the biggest deal, but Rudy still being alive at the end when she found him after the bombing, like, I think the whole point is, like, you don't get to, like, she didn't get to say anything, she didn't get to do anything, he didn't get to do anything, blah, blah, blah. So it just makes it even more, I guess, like, tragic sort of to have him alive at the end, but it's like, he's alive for 2 seconds, he died anyway, so why don't you just have him be dead like he was supposed to be in the book? Like, there's just so many elements that they changed, and I really liked, like, I liked a lot of the casting. I thought that Max looked pretty, like, spot on from how I pictured him. I wasn't a big fan of Liesel. I like her look, but I didn't really like the acting necessarily, and obviously Jeffrey Rush is, like, amazing, so he did a great job. But, like, and I liked, like, the aesthetics of the movie. I thought that was really pretty. But they changed so much that was, like, a core part of the story for really no reason. And it's like, why did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. So the movie got, like, 1 or 2 stars for me. Like, I think I still kind of cried at the end of the movie. Like, I wasn't a mess in either one. I cried more in the book. But I think I still, like, kind of shed a tear just for her, like, the parents mostly. But they changed so much that I was like, I can't even be emotionally invested in this because you haven't really told me enough. And I'm only emotionally invested because I know stuff about the book that I just read. So I know you're not supposed to watch movie adaptations right after you read the books, but I didn't want to put it off really. And like I said, I'm usually pretty good about adaptations. Like, I give them a lot of wiggle room. and this was just not good. So comment down below and let me know what you thought of the book Thief and also what you thought of the film if you saw it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all you guys soon. Bye!